and welcome to Solo Power Chrono Sword. And as you've seen from the introduction, there are some situations in which this build excels. You'll find it insanely powerful, strong, easy to demolish enemies, and some scenarios in which this build has not been built. So you can see how this isn't really the right build for raids, for high-end fractals, for world-to-world PvP. By all means, take this build, tinker with it, make it suitable for those, based on this, if you like. But that's not really why I've done this. I've really done this for those characters who have got to level 80 and perhaps they're looking for the next level build from their own. Perhaps they're looking for some ideas that can make them powerful and strong, demolish enemies in all of the story and dungeon and guild missions and lower level fractals and all these kind of things. And I'm hoping you'll find this dead easy to use, very simple, almost make it up as you go along rotation, and a build that you'll thoroughly enjoy. Right, so let's look at the armor. For armor, you want Berserkers throughout. For any power build, really, you're looking at Berserkers, but there are variations on that. But for this build, for the Solo Power Chrono Sword, you want Berserkers. Berserkers is power, precision, and ferocity. Power is the strength of the damage, precision is the accuracy of your strike, and ferocity is how hard your strike is. And you want those pieces throughout all your armor. You want it to be, as well as all of your accessories, rings, trinkets, all of it. You want it to be Berserkers. Now, as far as rune is concerned, the rune of the ogre is the one I've gone for. If you wanted the meta, if you wanted the traditional rune to go with a power build, you want rune of the scholar. Also, because this is a solo build and no one else is depending on your damage output except yourself, you can afford to change that rune for whatever suits your style of play. The way that you like to run is absolutely fine to change this rune. The reason I've gone for Rune of the Ogre is this. Points 1 to 5 are exactly the same as the Rune of the Scholar, which would be the meta for a power build. So on that regard, it's the same. On point 6 is where the difference is. Now, for Scholars, they have plus 5 instead of 4, plus 5% damage. But that damage is conditional. You've got to be above 90% health for that 5% damage to be applied. Now, if you are part of a group or part of a team, there is a good possibility that you will be able to stay above that 90% and enjoy that 5% damage. But when you're running solo, and this build is primarily designed for the solo runner, you are not going to be so fortunate as to keep your health above 90%, especially as Mesmer is a light armor class. So I prefer to go with this one that gives me plus 4 damage, 1% less, but it's completely unconditional. It doesn't matter how much health I've got left, how much health I had to start with. It doesn't matter what kind of hit I do, what weapon swap I've done. I will consistently get, without fail, that 4% overall damage boost, and I like that. Secondly, this rock dog. Now, I appreciate to a lot of meta worshippers that this would seem to be a gimmick. I promise you it's not. Just run with this for a while and you'll see how much you like it. For a start, the rock dog that is summoned, the cooldown on it starts immediately that it's summoned. So you will very frequently, there's hardly a time in battle that you'll be without your rock dog. It can do a fair amount of damage. If I let it go in and attack a level 80 enemy, it will kill it all by itself. Won't need any help from me at all. Obviously, I'm not talking about champions or veterans or elites, but I'm talking about a normal level 80 enemy. It can do it by itself. Now, of course, you wouldn't summon it really primarily just to go and do that while you sit back and have a drink. But more importantly, it takes aggro from you. Now again, I remind you, you are a light armor. Now you will be spamming out clones and illusions, and so to a certain degree, holding aggro is not something you need to worry about too much when you're playing solo. But it is nice that it can do so and allow yourself to do all the damage. It's really hard for me to explain how well that works. All I would suggest is, if you can, give it a try and see what you think, especially with the upgrade extractors you can get now. It'd be well worth giving it a try, and if you don't like it, you can always extract them and resell them. But by all means, like I said, because this is a solo build, no one else is dependent on what you're doing, by all means swap that rune out for one of your liking. Okay, weapons. Now it's a sword build that we're looking at, and truth be told, it's a sword build. You want a sword in both hands as your primary set. Again, Berserkers as per usual. And the sigils I've gone for is, in one hand, Sigil of Force. Now, any power build, the Sigil of Force, the 5% overall damage increase, is a standard. You don't want to swap that for anything else, no matter what variation of a power build you're doing. That is the one you want. Where your choices become prevalent is in the second weapon. Now, I've gone Superior Sigil of the Knight, but again, there's a lot of really good options. Lots of people go for Superior Sigil of Air. There's a number of things that you could go with, and to be honest, in this solo build, again, no one else is depending on you in a solo build. You can go with whatever sigil you like here. Now, the reason I've gone for Sigil of the Knight is because you cannot have two in the same weapon set Sigil of Forces. They won't stack. So I can't have 5 plus 5 equals 10. What I can have is 5 plus 3 here, making 8, just 2% short. But what's beautiful about this is that the additional 7% you get at night. Now, quite often, if you are in a long mission or in a dungeon or a story setting where you started in the day, but you didn't plan for it to turn night, you'll suddenly get a 7% damage increase. Now, bearing in mind that the Guild Wars night-day cycle is not the same as our own day-night cycle, you'll find that it'll change a lot more than you planned for. A lot of things you would go into thinking that it's day and soon turn to night, and lots of missions will be held at night that you didn't really twig were held at night, but when you're into it, they are. What a fantastic thing to have this 7% additional damage out of nowhere. I really like it, but by all means, go with what suits you. My alternative weapon set is the Greatsword. Again, this is important for this build that you have both sets available. Still Berserkers. I've still gone for the same sigils, Force and Knight. By all means, you do need to keep the Force, but by all means, switch the Sigil of the Knight to one that you prefer. Okay, let's have a look at the build. So the trait lines that you're looking for here are Chronomancer, of course, Domination, and Dueling. Let's go through each one. Dueling, you've got 3 skills here that you cannot choose. I'm not going to spend time on them. By all means, pause the video and have a look if you want. Let's go straight on to the 3 that I have been able to choose. Your Phantasms have Fury. You will have 3 Phantasms in this build, but you will have 2 that are very powerful indeed. And giving them Fury just manages to kick up that power, that damage that you're doing even more. Next is Fencer's Finesse. Gain a stacking ferocity effect when you or one of your illusions strikes with a one-handed sword or spear. Now, we only have one, that's this guy down here, Phantasmal Swordman, who strikes with a one-handed sword. Reduces recharge on your sword and spear skills, okay? So you are running sword in both hands, so you've got a reduced recharge of 20%. But the finesse is not to be sniffed at. 15 ferocity sounds low, that lasts for 6 seconds, but it's for every strike that it does. When you or one of your illusions strikes with a one-handed sword or spear. Now, for example, if you look down here, there's 8 strikes just for that. So 8 times there, you've then got 8 times 15. Suddenly, that's jumping up quite nicely, and it's not hard at all to get to the maximum stacks and add 150 ferocity out of nowhere, not just for you, but also for your Phantasm running that sword, whilst you're also getting a 20% reduction in the recharge on both weapons in both hands. That's great. Lastly, Superiority Complex. Your critical hits deal more damage. Obviously, we're running a power build. We're running full Berserkers in armor, full berserkers in weapons, full berserkers in accessories, trinkets and rings. So the chances of you doing critical hits are high. Critical hit damage against disabled foes or foes below the health threshold is further increased. So as you can see, the health threshold there is 50%. You're already getting critical hit damage increase of 15%, but you get an extra 10% according to the threshold when foes go below that. Again, another really nice boost to the damage that you'll be kicking out with this build. On to Domination. Again, the 3 skills that you can't do anything about. So I won't spend time on them, but we can just see what they were. Feel free to pause and look that up as we're going. Okay, let's look at the 3 I could choose. Illusions deal more damage. You will be casting not just in main phantasms in your Greatsword and in your sword build, but also we've got some illusions in your utilities as well. You will be kicking them out. For them to do extra damage is a really essential part of this build. Egotism. Deal more damage to foes with a lower health percentage than you. Obviously, you're a light class, so you wouldn't be expecting to have a high health pool. But what's great about this is because I've gone for a power build, not a vitality, not a strength build, but a power build, it has kept my health pool low. And the reason why that's good on this occasion is because this deals more damage to foes with a lower health percentage than you. So your damage will increase when they've got a lower percentage than you. And lastly, Vicious Expression. You and your illusions deal increased damage to foes without boons. Disabling a foe removes boons from them, and the disables are all of the usuals. So if you're in a mob, in a group, and you're fighting them and they don't have boons, you will get 15% extra damage. If you are fighting enemies who have got boons, if you manage to do any of those disabling, it will remove 2 of their boons. As soon as you've removed those boons, of course, you're getting the extra damage. Finally, Chronomancer. Again, the 3 that you can't choose. And then the 3 that you can. Delayed reactions. Disabling a foe slows them. So whenever you do any of those disables from any of your skills or any of your illusions doing those skills or anything like that, whenever you do that, you will also slow them for 3 seconds. Their skills and their actions are slower. The interval is 3 seconds. So as soon as that slows up, you can't stack it, but as soon as it slows up, you can reapply it. Now you'll see why that's good later, apart from what we already learned before about what happens with boon strip. When you've disabled them, you'll see in a moment why that's good. Gain additional critical hit chance against slowed enemies. So we have previously in the build increased our critical damage, and these critical hits chances are increased when we've slowed them, which is exactly what we've done whenever we're doing a disable. Critical hits deal additional damage to slowed enemies. Now we are, of course, every time we do any kind of disable, we are slowing them, which means whenever we critical hit anyone who we've managed to slow, we'll have extra damage on top of that. This damage, this bonus damage, also applies to any of your illusions. So if you've applied slow to any enemy, all your illusions, all your phantasms, and you will be doing the extra damage. And finally, Chronophantasma. The first time a phantasm would become a clone, that's when it's finished its phantasm rotation, it, instead of becoming a clone, resummons itself and attacks again as a phantasm. Resummoned phantasms inflict a percentage of the original's damage. Now, as you can see here, that percentage is 100%. Unfortunately, the price you pay for this is that for 1.5 seconds, your phantasm is dazed. So your phantasm's life has come to the end. It's about to turn into a clone. For 1.5 seconds, it'll be dazed before coming back to life as a phantasm. No waiting for another cooldown. That we can cut short. I'll show you how in a moment. But that's what happens there. Onto the skills. Your auto attack. See how the first two hits inflict vulnerability. Right at the beginning of this build, we saw how stacking vulnerability is helpful because we do extra damage whenever vulnerability is applied. This is your bread and butter sword attack. Not only do you blur, in other words, you evade all attacks, but this will hit 3 targets with insane damage. Illusionary Leap. What this does is this sends out an illusion that jumps to your target and starts a fight. At any time during that fight, before it dies, you can click this same button again and you will jump to where the enemy is. So you can take the place of the clone. So you let him do a little bit of damage, apply his cripple, apply his vulnerability, then you jump, you get in there, do the real damage, and your jump will affect a 2-second immobilize on the enemy. Of course, the immobilize is one of those disables that we talked about earlier. So you'll also inflict slow, you will also inflict major damage for having done so. Great skill. This skill, Illusionary Riposte, what happens here is that you press the button and you block. If you are attacked, you create an illusion. But if you decide not to wait to block, not to wait for that illusion, and you click it again, what happens is you shoot a bolt that dazes foes in a line. So you add that vulnerability, and remember you are doing more damage to any vulnerable foes. But you'll do a 2-second daze to 5 targets that are in a line. Just lining them up, ready for your phantasms, for anything you want to attack them with. It's a really underappreciated skill. And finally, your Phantasmal Swordsman. Perform a sword strike and create an illusion that attacks your foe. If the sword strike hits, you gain might. This is, again, it's a very strong phantasm. We've already boosted it to the hilt, and it's going to do a lot. Looking at it here, looking at the skill rundown, you wouldn't think it does so much damage, but the time we've traded it in the way we have, this will do a massive amount of damage. Now then, switching to the Greatsword. You've got all the usual Mesmer Greatsword skills, but the great one to add is the Phantasmal Berserker. Again, you're doing extra damage with him. A piercing 5 target, 4 swirling attack, swapping from that phantasm into that phantasm, and then keeping an eye on this healing, which will recharge all your phantasms immediately. You could just be kicking them out literally almost non-stop. By the time you've done that and that's recharging, these are going in, and you haven't even gone near the enemy yet, but by the time you've kicked those 2 out and dazed them, you haven't even jumped in if you wanted to with both swords, and they're already suffering great damage indeed. Okay, onto the utility skills. I've gone with this health skill, this healing skill. It's arguably not the greatest healer, okay? There are others that heals per clone as well as the healing on a 20-second cooldown. So it's arguably not the greatest heal that we've got. There's this well one here that also rewinds time, removing conditions. But the reason I keep it is the health is similar to this, but of course 10 seconds longer. But every time you summon an illusion, every time you click this one, the phantasm, the other phantasm, even this illusion from the leap, you will be getting 500 healing, 300 healing, beg your pardon. Really helpful to have. Secondly, of course, like I've already said, this will recharge your Phantasm Skills. Now, your Phantasm Skills, apart from yourself, are the real hard hitters, this one and this one. And when your health is going down, make sure that these have been triggered. Make sure these are on cooldown when you trigger your health. Use them so that when you trigger your health, they're renewed, they're ready to go. They're your most powerful allies. We'll come back to this one in a moment. These 2 you definitely need. This summons 2 clones. That sets up your shatter skills nicely. And this one is another phantasm. Phantasm that does extra damage if they haven't got boons. And that's really great. If they have got boons, this will remove up to 5 of those boons. A real boon strip, great phantasm to have on your team. The elite skill is Gravity Well. Not only does it do all these pulse damages, it also has a bigger, 3 times, 4 times bigger final damage on the pulse. And also note, it does a float, it does a pull, it does a knockdown. What's great about that is all of those are disables. So those disables trigger the slow, and that slow again allows you and all your phantasms and all your illusions to do extra damage. Finally, this one. Now I've gone for Mantra of Pain, and the reason I've gone for Mantra of Pain, it gives me these double strike here. I only use one at a time to try and keep it charged, of adding might to you. 360 power, double cast. It's very helpful, and while you're doing it also, you're doing damage, you're adding more vulnerability at the same time. It's a really good skill, but it is dispensable. In other words, if there was any other skill that you really liked and you thought, I really would have liked that as part of my build, or if you're in a situation that requires another guild, like another utility, like a reflect in certain dungeon situations, the great thing about that skill is it is dispensable. You can put in whatever you need, whatever the situation is, particularly useful since you're going solo again. So that's it, the Solo Power Chrono Sword build. I hope that's been helpful.